Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we are officially 4 weeks away from the 2022 NFL Draft. We'll take a look down memory lane, talk about our favorite draft picks at the time of the selection from the Eagles, and also on Mock Draft Monday, we talk trade downs for the Eagles. What teams could be looking to make a deal with the Eagles to move up? That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of the show, episode 4 or 5. Download it into your phone wherever you get Locked On Eagles. Also available in video form on YouTube and Twitter at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. He is Gino Camilleri. I'm Lou DiBiase. Gino, 4 weeks away from the draft, man. That came fast. And I know we've been talking about the draft for a while, the Senior Bowl, the Combine, Mock Draft Monday now for a couple months, but it's like there's still so much to talk about. And I know 4 weeks for us that's still 20 more shows we have to do, but man, it's coming fast. And this is, to me, the most highly anticipated draft for the Eagles since they traded up for Wentz in 2016 with 4 picks in the first 2 rounds.
Without a doubt. I mean, there's just a couple more days of pro days, and then we'll have all the numbers in.
Yeah, pro days are already over.
Yeah, I attended Wyoming and Colorado State the last couple days. I'm done with pro days this circuit. I know a lot of the scouts that were there, too. That was their last ones for them. So we're right in the midst of being less than a month away for a draft. So what happens? Final draft meetings happen. They solidify that board. In the buildings, they actually do tons of mock drafts. They look at the media mock drafts just to see what the scape of things are, but then they go through these scenarios. I think back to the Andre Dillard draft. They went through that hypothetical so many times that they never had an offensive tackle on the board, but the NFL draft is the NFL draft, and things changed. So right now you're identifying those players that you think will be key for you, and you have the ability with 15, 16, 19 to move around. That's what the optionality is. And less than a month away, Howie Roseman is going to be on those phones. I don't know if something gets done prior to the draft, but maybe it is like last year, Lou, where the Eagles and Dallas had that deal set up prior to draft night, and then things went through on draft night.
But you got to do that. You only have a certain amount of time when you're on the clock. You don't have time to work out trades with multiple teams. I totally agree. There's a lot to work to be done now with each and every scenario, preparing for every one, because as you said, the draft is so unpredictable. There's times guys go way higher than we think, and there's guys that fall all the time, and you're like, wow, we didn't think a Kyle Hamilton would be available at 15 or 16. So you have to prepare for every scenario. We'll get into some trade down talk. On Mock Draft Monday, Gino and I both explored what mock drafts would look like if the Eagles traded down from one of those first 3 picks in the first round to collect a 2023 pick. Today, I want to get into with Gino, who are the teams that could potentially move up? Because it does take 2 to tango. But, again, just from the fan perspective, again, the Eagles moved up for Carson Wentz, a franchise quarterback in 2016. That was the first time in my lifetime, as a coherent football fan, that they had ever done that. So that was a new level of excitement. This year, kind of the same thing. I can't remember the time the Eagles had this many draft picks. And although I love the reason they didn't have a lot of picks in 2017, 2018, 2019, you moved up for a quarterback. You were trading picks to win now in a Super Bowl window. We couldn't really complain. At the same time, mock drafts weren't as fun as they've been this year. So to, see the Eagles on the clock 4 times is just going to be really exciting and something we're not used to with this team.
No, it's going to be rapid fire, right? Like breaking down.
Yeah, we don't even have time
night.
to take a breath. We're going to have to dive into 2 picks, potentially back to back.
And this team, I think they're ready to do that. Like they're ready to have this influx of young talent. And I'm ready for it too. You talk about one of the all-time guys that slid, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. We were mocking to the Eagles in the first round. The guy goes in the 4th round.
DK Metcalf the same year.
Same exact thing. And some of these classes, you look at that great Saints class that they had with Alvin Kamara and Ryan Ramczyk, you're able to hit on that. but it takes swings of the bat, like Howie Roseman says. And if they hit on 2 of the 3 first-round picks, and let's say 3 out of the 4 picks in the top 51, yeah, you're going to be successful. But on the other end of it, it could really hinder this franchise. So we should be
there's a nerve-wracking part of it too, because there's
the
a lot that rides
should be
on
there.
it.
But we always say football gets nerve-wracking when the expectations are there. And I think a lot of us fans have expectations of what is going to happen on draft night, but we also have to keep our eyes open and our ears open, because Howie Roseman, out of all GMs in this league, loves to move picks up and down. He's done it essentially every year in his tenure as general manager. Now, with so much optionality, I've ran through the scenarios where if their first-round guys are off the board after 15 and 16, yeah, they might want to get out at 19. They might be willing to get out of 16 if the board falls in a less than favorable way. Hopefully it does, with quarterbacks going in the top. I think more quarterbacks will go than go in these mock drafts that all of us do. And I've been getting mad because sometimes I'm at 15 and not one quarterback is gone. I say that's not realistic. That's not going to happen. The Eagles have to be ready for that to happen. They have to be ready for their players that are going to fall and identify them and be willing to make moves. And that's what this draft class is. You're going to have to find your guys, but at the same time, they have so much ammo that the optionality to go and get their guys should be on the table at any given moment.
We're going to get into some of those options, specifically with a trade down coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, because they do have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds of the 2022 NFL draft. But if they want that same optionality and flexibility in 2023, and, they kind of set that up this year by collecting a first from the 2021 NFL draft, moving down with the Miami Dolphins. If they try to explore that route again, what teams could be willing to do a deal with the Eagles, because it does take 2 to tango. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's show is sponsored by the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is betonline.net. You can start betting on the draft right now. You've got college basketball, the NBA playoff push, the NHL as well. Get all of your props, everything you can think of at betonline.net. They're your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it, they remain the best spot for all your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. Because again, it's not just basketball or football. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. And this year, it's where the draft starts. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back in to this Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. We thank you for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Also, make sure you're following the Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On experts covering the biggest stories across the league every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your shows. So, Gino, we touched on this on Monday. We both did a mock draft where the Eagles moved at least one of their first-round picks this year in an attempt to collect a pick in 2023. And that could be, hopefully, it's a first-round pick like they did this year. The reason they have one of their 3 picks this year is that I think it's 16 because of the Miami Dolphins, because you moved down from the 6th overall pick last year with Miami. They moved up to get Jalen Waddle, and I would call it crazy enough. Miami was crazy enough to give you a 2022 first. So if you want to do that again, especially with quarterback being the big shadow in the background with this discussion, if you want the flexibility next year, if you're not convinced about Jalen Hurts after another season to potentially have ammo to go trade up for a quarterback, this is a route they could take. But I feel like at the same time, and we touched on this a little bit on Monday, you have to get another team to be willing to do this. I feel like last year with Miami, that was a rare case. Like, they moved up to take Jalen Waddle instead of taking DeVonta Smith and having that first. But, I feel like there could be some teams that could be willing to move up and give you a pick next year. Are there any teams specifically, like when I say that come to mind for you?
Well, first off, I want to say, imagine giving up 2 first-round picks for the second best Alabama receiver. And
Jalen Waddle's great. I love Jalen Waddle, but he's not a first, and DeVonta Smith. He's not a first-round pick's worth better than DeVonta Smith. I think Smith is probably better than Waddle.
You know my opinion. I thought DeVonta was the best of
Yeah.
the four to come out of Alabama in the last couple of years. But let's set up the landscape here, Lou. Currently, there are 8 teams that do not have first-round picks, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at these teams. If you want to get into 2023, these are the guys that you want to start calling, saying, hey, I know you don't have a first. What would you be willing to give up next year? Currently, the Bears, Broncos, Browns, Dolphins, Colts, Raiders, 49ers, and Rams do not have a first-round pick. And on the other side of that, there are 6 teams with multiple first-round picks. And the one team that I'm looking at, Lou, is Kansas City, sitting at 29 with San Francisco.
I wrote them down too. Yep.
And 30. And we've heard about Jameson Williams and the potential that they trade up for that wide receiver with the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm pretty sure Daniel Jeremiah mentioned those teams.
Is the Tyreek Hill replacement. Yeah.
That's a team that I'd be willing to go to. And when I did my trade down, I went to 27. Kansas City, we know their willingness to give up additional assets if they have their guy. Let's say Jameson Williams is on the board at 16 after we get our guy at 15. Let's say we take Jordan Davis like we did in the scenario that I did. Would you be willing to move back to 28 if you got a first next year?
I'd be willing to move back in the second round if I can get a first next year, to be honest with you, because then I still have 2 firsts this year, 2 seconds, and 2 firsts next year. And if you're not taking a quarterback this year, Gino, I'm all in on that. If you can get a first this year like you were able to pull off, 100%. And I don't want to say that's crazy and off the table, because there's a lot of trades Howie Roseman has made that I'm like the Dolphins trade last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was for a while this season, we were looking at that being a top 5 pick, which totally changes the conversation for sure, by the way. They're picking top 5 this year. But you're right. I'm glad you mentioned Kansas City because, normally with a trade down scenario, you look for what teams need a quarterback and need to get up because that's the most important position. If a team recognizes a player as their guy, they're going to give me anything at that point. I have all the leverage in that situation. But you mentioned a team like the Chiefs in a Super Bowl win-now window like the Eagles were in for a few years. You look at a team like the Buffalo Bills who are like that. Heck, the Green Bay Packers are in the same boat as the Chiefs. They also lost their wide receiver 1 and want to maximize, especially Green Bay over Kansas City, because Aaron Rodgers, they only got a few years left. You can try to find those teams in a Super Bowl window that would be willing to sacrifice future assets for the now, the short term. Teams like the Chiefs that are taking running backs in the first round to maximize the now with Clyde Edwards-Helaire a couple years ago. So I think those are some teams definitely to target. And the guys you mentioned that aren't even in the first round, like the Denver Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts, the Las Vegas Raiders, I think you have leverage there because those teams are trying to get rings. When you're trying to get a ring or a quarterback, you're willing to, as you should, you're willing to do a lot. Ask the Rams.
Especially in the landscape of today's NFL, teams are willing to move picks. Like Jeffrey Lurie said in his press conference the other day,
for sure.
You want to maximize the future while getting as much as you can out of the present. And I think those teams that you mentioned, and one team that's only a few picks behind the Eagles, the Arizona Cardinals at 23, Lou. If you move, let's say, from 19 to 23, you're going to get at least a third-round pick. And that's what I'm okay with. I'm okay with just accumulating more swings of the
we're
bat.
not saying just you have to collect a first next year. If I can get a second next year or even like a third and a fourth, something like that, just collecting more ammunition next year. Because again, with a trade up, it takes a lot and it's tough to come by. So if that, present itself this year, you should definitely be open-minded to it. And they did that last year.
And they done it in 2 of the last 4 years, 2018 with Dallas Goedert and DeVonta Smith in 2021.
Well, especially if the board doesn't fall right. That's another part of this scenario. If you just don't love what you have there, you don't want to force a pick. And if you can move down and collect a third and like let's see, you like Kyer Elam or Christian Watson, but you don't want to take him at 16. So let's move down to 27 and feel like we can get a player in that tier at that point. That's a part of this too, is how the board looks.
I think what they did when they drafted Marcus Smith was the perfect plan, but the execution was horrendous. Like the board didn't fall the way they wanted to. They took advantage of a team in Cleveland who wanted Johnny Manziel. They moved back. Obviously, they drafted the wrong guy.
They had to move down 2 more rounds to make it worth that value of Marcus Smith.
Absolutely. And I think they moved back twice, if I'm not mistaken, in that first round as well. And Howie Roseman is the one person that if I'm a GM and I have my guy, and I have an offer that isn't a kick in the face, who's the first general manager you're going to call? Mr. Howie Roseman. So you say it takes two to tango. Well, you have one guy that's at the wedding on the dance floor before dinner is even begun, and that's Howie Roseman. He wants to accumulate those picks. There's smoke and fire around the idea of them not making all three selections in the first round because they want to get that 2023 pick. But if they can do it with a team like Tampa, let's say, or let's say the Colts, like they get real desperate and trade a bunch of draft picks for their quarterback that's going to be the heir to Matt Ryan. Like that could absolutely be the case. But this team is going to identify value more than anything. And that's where I see a trade back coming into play more than a trade up. Because in a trade back scenario, and much like this board this year, you have to hope things go right. But in a trade up, you get more desperate and you're like, okay, I'm the Miami Dolphins. I want Jalen Waddle. I have to give up a first round pick.
Yeah.
I don't see the Eagles doing that.
Unless you can move up a few spots for like if Kyle Hamilton starts falling. But yeah, they're not going from, 15 to 5. Unless again, it's for a quarterback. I can't see that.
What they could do is move down, let's say like 19, get a first next year and move into the second round this year, and then potentially move back into the first round.
Which is what I did.
That's an avenue
I collected the Chiefs 52nd or 50th overall pick right by the Eagles 51st, use that in a third this year to get back to 32 with Detroit and take Christian Watson at that point. Mm-hmm. So yeah, man, I mean, you can double dip and, double trade like Howie Roseman has done before. It's going to be tough because I think a lot of teams will have this mindset. They'll see this quarterback class and also say, let's punt on this year. Let's get flexibility next year. But, you mentioned Indianapolis, Tampa Bay, they're going to be really good this year. Some teams might say, this is our best shot to find that quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. The Steelers, too, who are picking at 20 overall right now. If they want to get to 15, Mike Tomlin's been on his own personal quarterback pro day tour. It feels like he's that every single one this year. And I don't think Malik Willis is going to be available in that range. He's going to go top 5 easily. But Desmond Ridder could be. Matt Corral could be. Who knows? I think Kenny Pickett could go as early as 3-6 to Carolina, Atlanta in there in the top 8. But he could fall after that. I mean, I could see him plummet to the 15 to 32 range. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I do think that there are teams that are trying to win a Super Bowl right now or could get a quarterback that could be willing to trade up. It's going to be tougher this year than years past. But I think if there are options, you should be all in on that because you can have the future and still have a ton of picks this year. It's again, that's the great part of having so many picks. Even like in a trade up scenario, you still are going to have a ton of assets. So I'm kind of just down for whatever they do at this point.
I have a conspiracy theory that I just came up with.
Ooh.
Remember how they quote unquote love Kenny Pickett?
Mm-hmm.
What if that's the master plan to make
Howie
sure
Roseman, though, not smart saying he wasn't even there, though.
Yeah,
press
right.
Conference said I wasn't even at the dinner. I'm like, all right, I know you're trying to appease Jalen Hurts there, man, but can give us some leverage if that's what you're trying to do.
I see this class as being like the ghost of draft pass for this team, right? Like you hope 2014 doesn't happen all over again with Marcus Smith, right? Like you hope that avenue where the board doesn't fall in your favor doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then mix it with the Andre Dillard class where things did go in your favor, but I don't think you did enough work on that player. They have 3 first-round picks. They've done their work on every single scenario. And I think they're as well as prepared for a draft as they ever have been simply because they have so many options in the first 20 selections. And they have to have at least 20 guys that they're willing to take, right, Lou? And if not, that's where a trade scenario comes in. So maximize it.
Again, the board
Smith.
It's a huge part of this. It's not just about quarterback flexibility in 2023. It's, we've done a lot of mock drafts, and at times it's been run on corners and edge rushers and at times receivers. And you're like, I don't know. Sometimes there's not a player worth this 15th or 16th pick. And it's more 19 through 32, which would suck considering you have 3 picks this year. But at the same time, I do think there's a lot of talent that you will like. So, I'm feeling comfortable still with where they're at 100%, but there are some trade down candidates for sure. We mentioned a lot of teams, Super Bowl teams now, Green Bay, Buffalo, Kansas City, Tampa Bay. Even if Tampa Bay wants a quarterback, Brady's heir apparent. You mentioned Indianapolis, New Orleans, Pittsburgh. If Detroit didn't take Malik Willis with the second overall pick, they pick 32nd. They could try to move up and get their Corral or Ridder. A lot of interesting things definitely to keep a close eye on. And Howie Roseman is definitely going to keep a close eye on those. We'll wrap up the show. Coming up next, this is Locked on Eagles. Don't go anywhere. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back into this Thursday edition of your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. It's Locked on Eagles. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. It is episode 4 this week of 5. Download it into your phone wherever you get the podcast. And guys, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do have exclusive videos on top of all of our full episodes being posted on YouTube 4 weeks away officially today. From the start of the 2022 NFL Draft. We're going to have a live show, but before that, a ton of content. So subscribe with audio and video on all our platforms. Gino, wrapping up the show. We had a fun conversation today on Twitter at Locked On Birds. With the draft being 4 weeks away, kind of took a trip down memory lane. And we talked about early on the excitement of, Carson Wentz in 2016, how we just weren't used to selecting a franchise quarterback that high because you kept running it back with these lightning rods in the 2010s, like, Michael Vick and Nick Foles, and then you trade for Sam Bradford. You're this average team that had to find other ways to do it. Wentz brought a new level of excitement. That was the first time for an entire generation of this fan base that had never seen going to get a franchise quarterback. When it comes to, though, like other picks at the time of the pick, even if they became busts, which I'm sure a lot of them did that we're going to mention, like who are some of the names you can think of that were at the time got you the most juiced, like at the time of the pick for the Eagles?
I said it today, like Sidney Jones, man, it just continues.
I put him on there for you, man. I put him on the Twitter graphic.
I thought they could have got him in the first round if he remained healthy. Like that would have been their target, and they get him in the second round. So I was over the moon at that one. But sticking with the second round,
he was going to be a top 10 pick probably. Yep. He should have maybe have been CB1 over Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, I mean, Marshawn.
There was a debate though, man. It was like Stingley Gardner at the time. He wasn't a second round pick.
But the one draft that I really remember, like falling in love with the guy, I just remember ESPN continually cutting to Deshaun Jackson, and he's looking all swagged out with his whole family there, and you're like, Philly is interested.
And they hadn't replaced T.O. in
They don't make the
5
pick
years.
Initially at 50. I think it was 51, and then they take him at 53. They took Trevor Laws 2 picks before, and then they end up getting
Trevor Laws.
Yep, I know, but they got their guy, unlike when it happened back with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. They missed out on their guy. But here they got Deshaun Jackson, who revolutionized this franchise in a way. Yep. And after a decade of, I would say, darkness outside of the Terrell Owens year, Jeremy Maclin and Deshaun really brought a new juice to that team, and it started with Deshaun Jackson.
What do you mean? You weren't enjoying Kevin Curtis and Reggie Brown?
Bro, I'll never let Kevin Curtis live it down that on the last play of that NFC Championship game against Arizona, he ran a curl route 1.5 yards short of the sticks on 4th down. I'll never let him live that down. So Deshaun was a breath of fresh air after that. And I think the guy in the bottom left, Lou, you could see our reaction.
Oh, it was the my guy.
Year.
Yeah.
It was the guy.
We have the video reaction of me and you going completely nuts. And the best part of that story was you knew Smith was the pick like 2 minutes before me because I'm on a delay streaming. And the fact that you were able to contain your excitement considering you were pounding the table for this kid since he was a true freshman in 2018. Yep. And, you fast forward 3 years later and he becomes an Eagle. Yeah, I think most of the time it's quarterback and, the skill position players are the most exciting for fans because while we all know that, the meat and potatoes are the most important, that's how you're fed is with the linemen. But, most people don't get juiced and stand up and fist pump when they take Andre Dillard. I think, guys like us can because we're extremely giant draft nerds, but most fans don't get super excited. So yeah, I think a bunch of the names like Carson Wentz, Deshaun Jackson, and Jackson became the most, to me, still to this day, outside of quarterback, the most, and maybe even including quarterback, the most exciting player in Eagles history, where at any moment he could just change everything. It only took one touch of the football. And so Deshaun Jackson for me, DeVonta Smith, I remember too, and this was a giant bust, but the exuberation I felt when we were doing Twitter Live in the 2020 draft, and I'm thinking, here comes Justin Jefferson to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I was upset because we were infatuated with bringing in speed, so Gino, a deep threat. And then when you told me that it wasn't Jefferson and Jalen Reagor was the selection, I mean, we celebrated because at the time, what do we want for Carson Wentz? We're like, we need to get him that deep threat. And Deshaun Jackson, I think when we saw what Djax could do with Wentz week 1 of 2019, and then that went away, it was like, here's what it could be. Never mind. It's gone again instantly. That made us want speed in that draft so bad. And right now it looks horrible. But at the time, I can remember the excitement I felt for Reagor.
I'd say LaShawn McCoy probably is in there too, because after like Brian Westbrook went away, it was kind of barren there for a little bit.
Sure.
You have a mishmash of guys, and I just hope we get that excitement again, because even that DeVonta Smith pick, like I really felt nostalgic to like the Deshaun Jackson selection, where you're like, okay, you know instantly, day one, this guy is going to make a difference. And personally, if it was 2022 that Deshaun Jackson was getting drafted in, he'd probably be a first-round draft pick. Like, they would have cared less about his size and said, this guy can do everything we want to do on offense.
Yeah, 100%. Miles Sanders was kind of like that for me, too.
I was going to bring him up for you.
Again, a lot of it had to do with, I think, with the Reagor and Sanders pick was still had to do with Carson Wentz and building around your franchise quarterback. It's like pieces of the offense you didn't have. And after Jay Ajayi dealt with all those injuries after the Super Bowl season, Corey Clement was never what he was in Super Bowl 52. LeGarrette Blount leaves to Detroit. They didn't have a running back. I mean, we had to go an entire season, Gino, our first season together on LOE. We're talking Josh Adams and Wendell Smallwood. I mean, it was a disaster at running back. And that was the one piece we said, man, we'd love to get a Zeke Elliott for, with Dak Prescott for Carson Wentz. And then the year after it was, we need a deep threat. We'd love to get that next to Deshaun Jackson with Jalen Reagor. Sanders has worked out more than Reagor, but yeah, I think overall the theme of it is it's normally the exciting picks are quarterback and skill position players. But of course, we know at the same time that the team has to be responsible and take the positions that matter the most for winning, even if it's not sexy. And, everybody likes a good side dish more than, the meat and potatoes. That's what fills you up. But sometimes it's not always, the pot roast isn't as exciting as the mashed potatoes with gravy.
And sometimes you land one of those picks that isn't as sexy, and you get a Lane Johnson, you get a Jordan Mailata.
And I'm not complaining.
You get a Landon Dickerson, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Vinnie Curry.
I think they've taken like 85 to 90% of their top 2-round picks in the 21st century, Gino, have been linemen. I think the vast majority.
Your owner gets off of a statement where he says that the offensive line and the defensive line is exactly what you just said, the meat and potatoes of this team. So I'll say, as much as the anticipation is there, just be open-minded to what this team does. They're never a team that sticks to the script. They're never a team that does what anybody thinks they're going to do, but they're a team that identifies the parts of the football team that do matter.
Gino, by the way, you didn't even mention J.J. Arcega-Whiteside.
Bro, I was trying to get through that entire
I'm not letting you off the hook. You were screaming with joy. I have that audio clip somewhere too.
Dude, I created J.J. Arcega-Whiteside.
Yeah, you had a song.
I got a jersey upstairs. So, there's just some of those times when your heart gets a little
everybody
bit too
did it.
Emotionally invested.
Trust me, man. I would have been like that if the Eagles drafted Paxton Lynch in 2016. You just got to own the take sometimes, 100%.
Yeah, I will say that probably the last time a pick has had so much anticipation, I go back to when they traded Donovan, right? And everybody said, what is the Donovan pick? What is the Donovan pick? It turns out to be Nate Allen.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're always not DeVonta Smith. Sometimes they're always not Landon's. And you get a Nate Allen. You get a Danny Watkins.
We'll see, man. We'll see.
Hey, we're less than a month, though, Lou.
This is
the time that we're going to hit them with all of the information. I know we got to do our My Guys show. I know we got to release our top 10s at all the positions. There's so much left.
Our ranking summit will be coming. There's a ton coming here on Lockdown.
I like that. The ranking summit. Bringing everybody from around the world. We got the ranking summit.
It's coming. Make sure you guys subscribe to Locked On Eagles wherever you get the show. Available free Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms, in video form as well on YouTube. And we're always talking birds on Twitter. Hit us up at Locked On Birds, at TBIASI LOE, and at GC24_football. Thanks for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Now make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker. They bring the draft to life every single day, Monday through Friday, talking prospects, draft philosophies, you name it. It's free and available wherever you get your shows. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.